for the things that are so essential to our life journey, those things, we don't have to figure out how to make them happen. It's not our job. It's going to happen. It's a part of the program. Really, our only job is to allow it, not get in the way of it. The energy of authenticity and sincerity allows what is and what wants to be to happen on its own. And even if we get in the way of it, I think there's a sort of promise that some things are still going to happen. It just might be really hard and really difficult and really stressful to the extent that we're resisting this essential and promised change. Hello, everyone. In this video, we're going to take a look at Jupiter and Uranus through the houses. So I want to make a few points before I jump into this. It's really important that we understand this is going to express very differently for each one of us. The natal chart and the transits, they reflect and interact with our individual soul reality. So Jupiter Uranus in your 10th house isn't going to be the same for every single person. There are certain archetypal dynamics and descriptions that we can universally apply, but its application and context and experience can go in so many directions. So let's keep that in mind. Use your own personal intuitive sense of your life, your path, which is a big part of what this transit is about. We're connecting with what's objectively happening outside of our existing understanding, perhaps far beyond our existing framework, but perhaps within the algorithm and the program of our life journey. So we have to have an open mind, but by no means should this establish any kind of fixed, defined, this is exactly what it's going to be like. The second thing I want to say, even if this Jupiter Uranus in Taurus is manifesting in a particular house, it's going to activate many other facets of your chart. So first, Venus is a ruler of Taurus. So the position of your natal Venus is going to be very activated. In fact, Venus is activated during the entirety of this transit of Jupiter and Uranus both being in Taurus. Coming together, this is going to be not just highlighting the Taurian dimension of our life, but also the relational dimension. Since any time Venus is activated, it also activates Libra. So not just our own values and how we live and the enhancements and change in our life and the world that we know, but how we extend that and share that in relationship with other people, thus our understanding of our relationships. And this can be true even if this transit isn't happening in your 7th or aspecting anything in your 7th. There's sort of an implicit connection to all things Venus, and it's important to appreciate that. Lastly, look at aspects. And there are two things that I'll say about this. We can have aspects happening along with this transit. For example, anything you have in your chart at 21, 22 degrees will be very heavily activated, in particular if it's of a fixed sign, right? Taurus, Scorpio, Aquarius, Leo. If you have planets a little bit later on, like 24, 25, 26, well, it's in the field and it's moving towards that. Very, very soon, in the new phase of this conjunction, as Jupiter separates, Jupiter is going to move through the rest of Taurus really, really quickly. In fact, like the next big thing is Jupiter's leaving Taurus, entering Gemini, trining Pluto. So anything you have beyond 21, 22 degrees, especially if it's in the fixed signs, are also going to be very activated by this transit. And since this is a new phase, it's just beginning. Maybe this is the final preparatory point that I'll make. This is the beginning of a new cycle. So there's something seeding, something emerging right now, a new phase beginning to unfold. Likewise, right now, we're at the very end of an old cycle. So there's a deep sense of fundamental change happening, but it's very unformed, undefined. It's very subjective right now. We don't know where it's going, but we know it's going. And we'll say we can't resist it. There are certain things that are embedded in the soul program. Like I often quote Ramana Maharshi, that which is meant to happen, try as hard as you want. You can't change it. Try to make something to happen that's not meant to be, that isn't written in the program, so to speak. You can't make it. There's sort of an intelligence to the unfolding of our life. Free will isn't about endless options and possibilities. to quote A Course in Miracles, free will does not mean you can choose the curriculum. So we have this path, and it's sort of beyond our understanding of it. And I think a big part of this transit is maybe these changes are outside of our current philosophical framework and understanding of where our life is going, but it's for the better, right? It's going to bring something better than what we've known, albeit it might be difficult and uncomfortable and perhaps shocking and destabilizing to our sense of security and stability right now. But we watch it unfold in time, and that's going to be really revealing over the first 10 degrees of separation, and especially as we move into the first semi-sextile, which will happen, I believe, next year. More of what this is actually looking like, so we can track that. Let me share a few essential pointers that we're going to be referencing as I look through this Jupiter-Uranus transit through the 12 signs. The first is just 3 essential points. This is going to point to, 1, the stress of inauthenticity, right? This can be bringing up where we don't feel in our place, right? Like we don't feel like we're in our position. It's not comfortable. The way that we're living is outside of our authentic values. And so the stress of that, of not being connected with our truth, with our sincerity, might be really heightened right now. That itself might be calling for a new decision, a new change, or a new insight around things that we can change in our life. Or circumstances might really be pushing us out of our comfort zone, even if that comfort zone doesn't feel like us, right? We can be very comfortable in a reality that feels alienating or uncomfortable or out of place, right? So we're going to be tuning into where we might be feeling and very present to the energy of inauthenticity. 2, there will be new insights, new vision into our personal soul path. This is what often happens when you remove the obstacles of perception, the worldview and the limits of our little hole in the wall or hole in the ground, where we see a very small portion of the sky. When you step outside of that, there's an expanded experience of life, and we suddenly realize, oh, there's so much more going on, so many more ways of thinking of myself and relating to my experience and what I need. So in that, we're going to experience potentially the movement towards the freedom of the unknown and the wide open road, where when we are authentic and sincere, what comes with that is that sense, the felt, embodied sense of I'm where I need to be. When we really internally have that experience of I'm where I need to be, we feel like the life before us is open and free. And we can trust it, and we feel an underlying optimism with it. So that's a potential within these signatures. A few points that I want to make about just this happening specifically, not just a conjunction, but happening in Taurus. Taurus reflects where there's a certain comfort and familiarity in the known. And sometimes we really need to let go of this familiar in order for something better to come in. But the main challenge with Taurus is we often don't know that we're going to be okay. Whatever secure attachments exist or forms of attachment, we often don't know if what's next is going to be better or okay, if we're going to be okay, if other people are going to be okay. Are our basic needs going to be met? And what's essential within that is these changes fundamentally point to not just our own sense of security, but am I going to be able to, like the existential dimension of Taurus is we need to survive, and even more than survive, feel relevance and meaning and value and life and liveliness in our existence. Otherwise, there's really no motivation to do this evolutionary work, right? Like from a Plutonian Scorpio perspective, this evolutionary work is about death and change and kind of finding the eternal element within the midst of all the comings and goings. But we have to want to be here. We have to have a sense of self-esteem and self-value and feel like I'm living the life that I'm choosing to live. So there's oftentimes a lot of deep resistance within Taurus to budging. But again, we might need to budge and move out of the comfort so we can actually feel I'm here, I'm alive. This is my personal life that I'm living. I often say the Taurus Scorpio dimension is we have to really want to be here and live and be alive so that we can do the deep evolutionary work of dying. And so this is fundamentally about being grounded while the ground is perhaps changing, and having the trust in the greater path and finding stability in moving into the unknown. I think with Jupiter, we can even intuit there's a path unfolding here. One more thing I want to say about Uranus, and I've mentioned this before. We can often, in different moments of our life, get these signals sort of arising from beyond our personal subjective field of awareness that might seem non sequitur or irrelevant or disconnected to the life that we consciously think that we're living. These signals will often point to our personal or collective destiny or the unfolding of our individuated path when we're not suppressing that. We will often experience these messages. They can be literally just visions or synchronicities, a stream of them, or dream messages, and they're undeniable. Like they're very like, this is presenting itself to our consciousness years before these events actually happening. From the Uranian point of view, this corresponds to the program, the things that are just a part of what's meant to be. They might correspond to sort of choice points where we have the opportunity to make certain changes and or just simply what's going to happen. It's a trip thinking about there are just certain things that are going to happen, and I can share many stories of my own life, some of which actually correspond to older Jupiter-Uranus cycles, where there was vision, there was very clear signaling from the sort of the objective realm of non-personal, non-subjective reality, pointing to something that's already done, even though in time I haven't quite yet been there. And so we have to appreciate that there's sort of a destiny here. There's an unfolding of the path, and we can intuit that from a Jupiter point of view and be willing to let go and just trust the algorithm, trust the program. Okay, and once again, look at your Venus. This is going to speak to where we have the opportunity to elevate and expand the value and meaning of our life, more resources, opportunities, and clear vision for what's of greatest value and essence in our life. Okay, so with that, let's tune into Jupiter-Uranus through the houses. I'm going to share the chart. I'm going to be using whole signs. It's not what I usually use, but for the purposes of just clearly demonstrating a clean chart and toggling through the houses, that's what I'm going to use. Use whatever house system you use. When we look at this, let's also appreciate that we're going to have the semi-sextile between Taurus and all of that Aries. So all of this very strong, post-eclipse time and all of these strong transits in Aries, especially right now, Mercury is soon to station direct, and then we'll move direct to be in a semi-sextile to Uranus and then Jupiter over the next few weeks. Just take into consideration the changes happening in your life within Taurus are happening also with respect to all of this really strong Aries energy. Something new and unformed is beginning to define itself, and it's going to call upon a great amount of leadership and courage and trust in the unknown. In many ways, this is about trusting ourselves and our life and our strength and our capacity and our value, even if it's scary, even if it feels like I've never been here before. Okay. I'm going to be time signaturing this video so you can jump around to whatever house placements you want to look at. Let's start with the first house. So Jupiter, Uranus, and Taurus in the first. Fundamentally, Taurus in the first house is about self-stability and reliability and strength. I can rely on my own inner resourcefulness to be able to be a leader of my own life. I can make fundamental changes. I can determine what I need and where I need to go. It does call upon a lot of self-trust and self-leadership and strength. In fact, this really combines that Aries and that Taurus energy that I was just speaking to. What is it like to make a new choice that you've never made before and to not know that you're going to make it? In a way, we need to have a sort of courage and audacity to make bold new changes here. And I think this really highlights we're not going to experience something new if we're not willing to take a risk. In many ways, there might be this impulse, this strong energy that's pushing us for more excitement, more authenticity, something that's more free. And if we feel stifled, like the stifled quality with Taurus in the first house is we lack that freedom of movement. We want to feel that sensual embodiment, that enlivenness, that we're in control of our own life. So if we don't feel that we're able to make new choices, we feel stuck or stifled by an existing path, this might be a calling to trust ourselves and say, hey, I've never done this before. This is completely radical. It's a complete game changer. Not myself or anyone else expected this of me, but I'm going to fill in the blank. I'm going to do that thing that I never thought I would do. And if we're not in touch with that, again, there can be the sense of stress and overwhelm. We might be wary of defensiveness. And this is very true with the first house and also the transit in the second house. The tendency to isolate because we feel so stifled or overwhelmed. In fact, really any placement with Taurus, there could be this sort of self-isolating tendency because of that feeling of I'm stifled by my life and I want to get away from the status quo and expand into something new. But we might really feel that draw to spend a lot more time with ourselves, to get to know ourselves. But there can be that defensiveness and block and resistance to really interacting and sharing with others if we feel deeply inauthentic and out of touch with our own life. So the insight here can simply be, there are more paths that I can walk. There's a wide open road here, potential and choices that I can make if I'm willing to trust in myself. Okay, let's look at the next house, second house. Here we're looking specifically at how we're consolidating our own resources and value to live a life that is deeply meaningful, personal, and relevant to ourselves. We need to honor and trust ourselves, and this is fundamentally a revolution in our own self-esteem and self-value. We need to know who we are and what we need, and no one else can determine that. And there's no one that says, you have to earn money this way. This is how you're going to qualify and substantiate your physical existence, by getting a job and doing these things. How can you get what you need? What can you engage in tactily, physically, right, fully, that really brings life and joy into your life? Who is that guy? Rick Rubin, his book is right there. He said when it comes to, doing what you love, you'll get some other job just so you can have more time to do what you love. In a way, this is separating any kind of conditioning that we might have around how we need to survive and live here, what we need to do in order to exist, and sort of seeing the truth of it from a very simple and uncontrived place. I do exist here. I have a body. It is my experience. How can I honor and claim my own personal experience in life and move towards what enhances the joy and the embodiment and the pleasure that I'm here to experience? And there's one other dimension here to tune into. This really highlights the tendency to want to stay in the comfort and the fear of not having what I need. And so we need to be also open to lots of things changes, like the resources that we have, the ways that we live, the things that we're familiar with that make us secure, the way that income comes in, or how we get our food, or the house that we live in, right? The pathways that are familiar to us, they're known, but they might be very, very limited. So we need to trust our intuition, follow the guidance. Where are you called to go? What new opportunities and experiences? There's always a narrowness in the second house where we don't really see what's out there because we simply just know what we know, but we're missing everything. I had an experience recently, earlier today, where just being with my daughter at the farmer's market and then going to the park on 1, 2, 3/4 separate occasions, I've had a spontaneous interaction with people that related to astrology and my work with astrology. And I usually never have that, right? On any given day, on any given month, really, in any given season, I might have one maximum interaction with someone local about astrology. It's incredibly rare, like once a year, that I'll give a reading to someone in person. Right? But just using that metaphor for the second house, there are more avenues of potential and experience if we're just willing to see our life in a little bit more of an unconditioned way. And there might be ways of bringing in sustenance and surviving and living more in alignment with your soul if we're open to these changes. Okay, let's go to the third house. Taurus in the third house corresponds to mental self-reliance. There's a poetic quality to it. I can think for myself and chew on my own thoughts, reflect, ask the questions that are relevant, really ground and tune into what do I need to know? Why do I need to know it? How am I going to find out? There isn't a reactiveness to the mind. I'm going to consider my thoughts. I'm going to take my time to really contemplate what's of essence, what's of value. Now, the security patterns with Taurus in the third house is the map that we know. Right? Our intellectual framework of reality says, I walk outside, that's the name of the street, you turn, it goes here, you go here, this is where these things are. And so we have our framework of reality that logically pieces information together so that we feel secure about where we're at. There's a need to be open to new information, new perspectives, new data that might be far beyond the framework that we're familiar with. And so this does ask us to think more deeply and not just fall into the comfort and the familiar patterns of what is known. We might find ourselves faced with experiences in life where we don't have the intellectual resources or the knowledge or the information to deal with certain problems or questions. We might find ourselves lacking in a broader framework for understanding our reality. So this is thinking outside of the box. If you're in school, for example, literally or metaphorically, there's the curriculum that the teacher's giving that you're expected to learn, but then there's the freedom of your mind that's wanting to know. Consider the metaphor of, a scientist looking through a telescope or building a telescope, or thinking about how do you create a telescope and gathering the resources, gathering the information, and actually looking and seeing something no one else has saw and being able to build new connections and expanding the framework of reality. Or you're studying astrology and suddenly you realize a question, a thought that you've never had before, and a whole new path of learning and investigation. I think in whatever context of life, if we feel ourselves being stifled, that we don't have the freedom of mind to think and see new pathways, we might feel very rebellious or stifled or stuck within the limits of our intellectual world. We need to be willing to see things and have new frames of perception that we've never experienced before. Okay, fourth house. Taurus in the fourth house is emotional self-reliance. I'm able to identify and provide for my basic needs, right? The basic need with Taurus in the fourth is emotional stability. I know how to care for myself, self-care, self-nourishment, and there's a need for that continuity of stability, of emotional care and support. This can become very material or very sentimental in terms of the objects and the things that make me feel secure. So this is fundamentally change in your home life. Maybe you are comfortable, but how can your home, which both corresponds to how you care for yourself, but your sense of family and tribe, how might that want to expand? We have these dreams of living in community on land. A lot of people have that. But what keeps us from our greater potential and vision is, but this is so comfortable, or the emotional patterns that I'm familiar with are so comfortable, I don't want to make any changes. And I think this really points to also the potential for emotional alienation. In fact, you can think of the energy of alienation or isolation with any of these signatures. I'm living by myself or in the container of whatever structure of emotional support or family that I'm familiar with, but it might feel very stifling. But it's safe and it's familiar, and I know that I'm not going to be insecure. This might be a calling to expand our understanding of family, to expand our experience of what it means to be cared for, and what it means to share in the family experience and nourishment with other people. How we live and how we know ourselves to be held and grounded in this life wants to open up more deeply. If we find ourselves having a family or in any kind of domestic situation, this might in some sense be inviting a more expanded, for example, we have the nuclear family archetype, which might really work well for a lot of people. But for a lot of people, the nuclear family experience is far too stressful for so many souls that are drawn to live in a way where community comes together, which really resonates with something that I think is embedded within our collective soul memory, where family and community were interwoven. And it wasn't, you and your family in your home and them and their family in their home. Something a lot more communal. And there's a more intelligent way of caring for ourselves and our experience here when we're open to a greater field of connection and sharing. And one framework for understanding all of this is there's a higher, more intelligent, more evolved, beyond the box of what we know, in way of experiencing life, in whatever placement this is in. One more point to make about the fourth house is this is also freedom of emotion. If we feel ourselves emotionally alienated or stifled or out of place, this might be bringing forward a new insight, like a new emotional insight, where we find more space in our emotional body to express ourselves, to move this energy. The more we feel something, the more we're able to access our internal emotional landscape, the more insight and perspective. But if we're feeling stifled and stuck and we're not feeling this emotional spaciousness and health, then we'll have a very narrow understanding of our life and our place within it. Fifth house. So Taurus in the fifth house speaks to our embodied sense of creative potential, expression, sensuality. It's like the artist that is just full of their own chi. It's very embodied. We're combining two fixed energies, Leo and Taurus here. So there can be a lot of life force, a lot of energy, a lot of creative potential, a lot of grace and art and beauty within the signature. But that can feel very stifled if we don't really feel that we can express ourselves in new ways. This wants to revolutionize and expand our framework for how we can actualize. This might be encouraging us to think outside of the box of our own creative expression. What's really wanting to come through our own soul? Sometimes when we stop trying to fit all of this creative energy in the way and in the framework that we're familiar with, something new and spontaneous opens up. It also arises to say, whatever this creative expression is for you, there's a need to be a little more spontaneous and fluid and uncontrived. When we're trying to produce something, we can get too narrow and too fixed, and we impede upon the organic unfolding of actually what wants to happen. Like, this is like the creative muse that wants to be birthed through us, and we don't even have to understand it. It does call for us to experience the freedom and the promise of creative potential and possibility in our life. But we need to feel open and not stuck and not defined by the precedent of what we've always been doing and what we've always known. Something that Rick Rubin writes in his book. There are people that have these incredible creative experiences in life where it's just they're activated and all this energy is moving and they create this album, but it only happens once. It happens once because they're not stable, right? There's too much doubt, too much chaos in their life, and they haven't been able to really use it to create. And the key with the artist is to be able to use all of the chaos and the stress, or maybe even the instability that we experience inside, but to channel it in creation. So there can be a boredom here. Like I'm discontent. I'm not feeling alive, right? But there's a lot going on, a lot emotionally, a lot of deeper soul content that we can use and channel in more creative work. And those that are constantly producing creativity, it's not because there's something more or less creative about them. A lot of these souls sort of take the noise and the chaos and the nuance and the tension of their own personal life experience, but they've gotten good at using it to make more art constantly. So that's a good reference for thinking of this in the fifth house. Okay, sixth house. Here we're looking at our routines, our rhythm, our work, and the archetype of the sixth house fundamentally is about self-improvement. The things that we do to do the things that we need to do. And every facet of our life is always about this ongoing journey of self-improvement, cultivating techniques and sort of routines for what we need to do to maintain all the various details of our life. This can become monotonous, right? A sort of boring, I'm just doing these things and maintaining them, and also very possessive. I'm stuck in the rhythms and the routines. Let's take a morning yoga practice. We might be doing that morning yoga practice, and I think this transit brings up that reflection. Why are you doing it? Where is it taking you? Is it working? And whatever work we're doing in life, this wants more health, more engagement, more relevance and alignment, that the work that I'm doing, the rhythms and the routines and the patterns that I'm creating to maintain my physical existence, they're soulfully relevant and meaningful for what I'm really here to work on. If there's any sense of just sort of stagnancy and busy work, what it's actually going to point to is this internal sense that we're procrastinating and putting something more essential out. There's a very strong tendency, especially with Taurus in the sixth, to feel a security in, okay, I got all of my shoes aligned, everything's in order, everything's organized, and I feel control over my reality, but it doesn't necessarily feel good. I'm not necessarily thriving in it. I'm not necessarily healthy, but at least I have control. So this is asking us to really tune into, what is it that we might be putting off? What training, what apprenticeship, what, the sixth house is an ongoing daily practice that we cultivate greater mastery with over time. Imagine, to take the yoga practice analogy, sort of thinking like, what is yoga? What am I really doing when I do these asanas or these movements or these stretches? And actually getting more into the direct experience. By the way, direct experience is the Jupiter words with the Uranus. We're wanting to feel that the life we're living isn't like just some motions that we're moving through. We're tasting the orange juice, right? We're tasting the truth of what we're doing. It's personally alive and relevant. Not a belief system, not conceptual, but alive and real and relevant for us. So maybe there's going to be some changing in our work or our routines or how we're living our life and the things that we do that will open up a path of cultivation. Or if you're a healer or a teacher, what might you want to be working on right now that will really bring out more of your potential, more of your skillfulness, bring you towards greater mastery. There's always a new way of looking at your health, your body, and the different details and routines of your life from a more elevated, objective, freed up perspective. Let's look now in the seventh house. Within every single relationship, there's a tendency here to say, I'm comfortable with you. I like the way this feels. In fact, you make me feel good. So you're kind of in some way a commodity. You're a possession. And maybe I'm a possession to you. Like, we can sort of oversimplify our relationships from the point of view of how it makes us feel. And in that sense, there may not be a lot of intimacy, but it's known and it's familiar and I feel good. Or I don't like the way I feel, so I'm going to get out of here and do something else. This wants us to open up our minds, to look at every single relationship in our life from the point of view, how can our conscious communication, our conscious relationshiping, become a point through which each individual is supported to get what they need and to share and exchange in this energy of giving and receiving, not because you need to, not because you're addicted to the comfort and familiarity, but because you want to, and we want to enhance the betterment of our own lives. This might fundamentally mean our ideas of the precedent and what things are supposed to be and how we're supposed to be relating and what it looks like actually might be changing. There's a gross tendency with Taurus in the seventh house to become limited and very narrow in the structure and form of our relationships because it feels good and it's familiar. I mean, even if it doesn't feel good, it's still familiar and known. So in a way, this calls for greater listening. What do you actually want? What do I actually want? What are my real needs? What do I actually have to give? And what do I need to ask for? Through the spectrum of authentic intimacy and listening, we discover so much more out if we're willing to embrace change. Likewise, there might be certain relationships that are just meant to come into your life, or you might be meant to come into someone else's life, where in that new relationship experience will promise a new path, offer some kind of expansion. So follow that sort of that intuitive draw. Who's showing up? Who are you drawn to right now? Okay, moving into the eighth house now, it's a similar dynamic. There might be the commitment, the entanglements of what we've merged with. And so the eighth house is all the things that we commit to, where we bring ourselves into conscious relationship with people, places, things, and experiences that will promise some kind of evolutionary growth, some sort of deep change where through that relationship, we're going to access and confront the deepest psychological limitations, our deepest fears, but grow through them. There's a time within the eighth house for commitment. There's a time for letting go. That which no longer serves or is relevant anymore needs to be released. The key is to fully meet each relational experience for what it's meant to offer and commit and see it through entirely. Taurus in the eighth house in particular, there can be this deep fear of, I'm entrapped, I'm stuck, and thus I don't have my body, my freedom, my resources. There's often a push-pull dynamic with Taurus in the 8th in going deeply, very deeply, but then needing to retreat and kind of be alone with oneself to kind of survive, reconnect with myself, my body, my values, my own pleasure, but then being drawn once again to something deeper. So we're really learning how to live, how to be grounded in the midst of fundamental and deep change. Jupiter Uranus here might speak to, we might find ourselves sort of suddenly becoming very interested in understanding the deeper psychological undercurrents of our life. Why is this happening? What's really going on? So beyond the surface dimension of the changes or the conflicts or the dramas or the challenges, we begin to sort of see it from a more bird's eye view. What's really going on here? What's the evolutionary signature at the core of all of my experiences? So we're not taking it personally, and we can actually cooperate with the curriculum. How is everything reflecting back to me my own internal soul reality? Otherwise, there can be a lot of attachments, fear of change, fear of letting go, fear of making new decisions. This wants us to see our reality from the point of view of the soul, from the point of view of our agency and our sovereign being. And what is it like to move through experience where we're not afraid of deep change? We're open to the comings and the goings because we're staying more in the witness consciousness and we're willing to embrace whatever comes next. That's one dimension of it. There also might be, incredible opportunities in collaboration, in business, in relationship that are very expansive. So again, see who's coming into your life in that regard. There might be something that's very promising here as well. Okay, 9th house. Taurus in the 9th house says the journey of life is bigger and wider than you know. And you can walk this path. You have what you need. You can go where you're called to go. Follow your intuition, follow your guidance, and the answers and your intuition is something that you have inside of you. You can trust your intuition. Your intuition is your deepest resource. And this basically says your spirituality, and you can think of it as your spiritual practice, your belief system, your cosmology, but your understanding of your life and where you're going, it's not limited to or defined by the narrow framework of what you've known. And the issue with Taurus in the 9th can be a sort of simplicity in the life that we're living where it doesn't feel like anything new is happening. Or maybe we don't really trust ourselves to make new choices or expand beyond the little bubble that we know. Taurus in the 9th is I'm secure and well-resourced and grounded on this wide open pilgrimage of soul life, journey awakening. There's so much to experience here and I'm okay. I'm grounded and I'm ready for it. In some sense, it says the path is opening up here. Follow your intuition and most importantly, speak the truth. That's a quality too. Like speaking your truth is Jupiter thing. Coming back to the 7th house too. Speak your truth. Coming back to the 8th house, speak your truth, right? In some cases, it's not social or relational. It might be honest to yourself about where you're really at. Don't try to fit yourself within a belief system. There's a lot of unknown here, and it might be uncomfortable and unfamiliar. Literally, metaphorically, you've never been here before. And so it's a foreign land. But you're going to learn something new here. And if you're a teacher or if you're sharing meaningful life lessons, you might find yourself more available to share, right? To offer yourself and to be of contribution to others. You might come into relationship with other teachers or other paths, other ways of thinking that are new for you. Be open to that. It's going to be for your better. Okay, 10th house. This is where we are taking responsibility in life. On the one hand, Taurus in the 10th house says, I want stability and ground. I want to manage my finances, my resources, my engagement, my involvement in life in a responsible and conscious way. What I do is relevant to how I'm impacting my family and my society as a whole. There can be a very strong materialistic focus with Taurus in the 10th house, right? So I have my job, my work, my role in society, my job, how I take care of my family, like all of these very physical dimensions. And maybe their status, maybe their success, but do you love it, right? Do you feel connected with your purpose? Do you feel like you're doing what you really want to be doing with your own life? So this might be calling to step away from the box of who you've been or the picket fence, husband, wife, 2.5 children, 3 televisions, 2 cars, the status quo of whatever that conditioning is for you, and actually looking more deeply, what do I really want to do? And 10th house is about discipline. So we have to discipline ourselves if we want to experience something new, something more enlivening, something more exciting and relevant to our own journey. Do you really want to be doing something else? Well, set yourself in that motion. If you really want to become an astrologer, start moving in that direction. If you're not happy with the status quo of your life, be honest with yourself. And it's always about be honest about how you feel. Whatever changes you make from that place of sincerity and honesty, it's going to open up new doors and make you available for new experiences, job offers, promotions, entrepreneurship opportunities that you didn't otherwise see. But I think the stress here is, but I need to provide. I won't have what I need. There might be a calling to sort of meet where we are suppressed and not allowing ourselves to trust our own inner authority and our ability to navigate this world and actually find and come into alignment with a better way. Something to remember about all of these signatures is, again, what's meant to be will be, right? Like where we're going and what's going to happen is what's going to happen. We don't have to figure it out. We come into alignment through authenticity and sincerity and honesty with ourselves along this path. And the life journey takes us there. I find this to be so over and over and over again. For the things that are so essential to our life journey, I might even put this at the very beginning of the video too. For the things that are so essential to our life journey, those things, we don't have to figure out how to make them happen. It's not our job. It's going to happen. It's a part of the program. Really, our only job is to allow it, not get in the way of it. The energy of authenticity and sincerity allows what is and what wants to be to happen on its own. And even if we get in the way of it, I think there's a sort of promise that some things are still going to happen. It just might be really hard and really difficult and really stressful to the extent that we're resisting this essential and promised change. Okay, let's move on to the 11th house. In a way, the 11th house is about being content as a group of one, right? The community is inside. I have what I need. I love being by myself. I don't have to worry about fitting into other people. There might be, on the one hand, a deep discontent, right? I don't relate to my community, or I seem like I'm on the outskirts all the time. The teaching here is don't try to belong, don't try to fit in. Be yourself, live your values, live how you live, and find your way in life. The people, places, and things that resonate with that vibration are going to come into resonance with you, and that's always going to happen at every part of your life. If you find yourself isolated and alone and desiring more community, it's again not about seeking it or trying to be involved in something, but follow your draw, right? Who are the people or the community or the groups that you're drawn to? Follow that even if it's totally out of the ordinary. For 10th and 11th house, there can be that fear of, I might be judged, I might be different, people are going to look at me funny, or, you're in the mainstream church and you want to join this like meetup astrology group. Meetups are like in the 90s. Meetup still exists, and find new friends with this group that you've never, follow that. And if there's a sense of, I'm too different or no one's going to understand me, don't worry, because that's not the point anyway. This is about you understanding you. We have also in the 11th house where we're liberating our mind from the precedent. And so we see and experience more of what is prior to and beyond any story or projection that we give of it. So our life and where we're positioned resonates with a greater ecosystem of life itself. So the communities that are forming together and the collaborations are going to resonate with your interests. Like for me, I'm like so interested in binary star theory. And I realize there's a conference that happens on the binary star theory every year in California, and I'm going to go to it this year. And just thinking about that makes me think of this 11th house. I feel so excited about the idea of being around other people that are also talking about this. They may not be astrologers, right? We're never going to find a group of people that share all of our values or all of our unique qualities, and that's not the point. If we're looking for the right belonging with the 11th house, we're never going to find it, because there's no one that's going to be the galaxy and universe and ecosystem that you are. All of life lives inside of us. So the key is to be able to appreciate all these different communities that we resonate with in different ways, and it allows for a beautiful, container of sharing and growth where something will expand in this world. I think there's a lot of new insights and collaborations and opportunities and potentials if we're really willing to be honest with ourselves and stay true to ourselves, to be who we are and follow where our path is taking us. Okay, lastly, 12th house. Taurus in the 12th house, to me, is sort of the most highlighted example of the spiritual monastic or the hermit, right? That archetype is about withdrawing from the world and going within, simplifying the senses, and experiencing that which is transcendent of the physical reality. So on the one hand, this can be a deep, deep draw to go inside, to get quiet, to reorient our attention beyond the noise and the drama and the chaos of this world, and spend more time with yourself, maybe in nature or in quiet with your tea, in meditation, in practice, in contemplation, in poetry, whatever it might be. By the way, writing new poetry or just beautiful new words and insights that are expressed through you can also be a really nice third house expression here. This contemplative life of being with the non-formed, the non-physical, the underlying truths behind at the core of the world that we think we see. At the same time, this can be dissolving any kind of meaning or materialism that we've placed in our life. If it feels like everything's coming to a close or we don't know what direction we're going anymore, it's because the meaning that we've placed in our life isn't ultimately meaningful. We might have certain gifts and skills, and it's about using all of that as a conduit for how meaning, with a capital M, wants to use us as an instrument. So on the one hand, things might be ending and dissolving, really drawing us within to reconnect with what's my inspiration, what's my guidance, what's truly of essence in my life. And we might be drawn to really look at our dreams and the metaphor and the symbology of our life and what's really being shown to us from within. And at the same time, our own gifts and our contributions might emerge very strongly right now. We might become more and more of an instrument to share our gifts, to offer ourselves in a way where the richness and the wisdom and the beauty inside wants to come forward. So we become an instrument where all the things that we've been developing for a long time prior to this point suddenly becomes universal and takes on a life beyond ourselves, where suddenly we're fulfilling something greater. So whether it's that hermitage, I'm going within and becoming very quiet and dissolving and letting go, or suddenly we're an instrument for something transcendent of ourselves that's much greater than ourselves and it becomes very well known, they're the same thing. It's all about allowing ourselves to get quiet, stepping away from the false meaning and materialism of life and giving ourselves to what has true meaning and focusing more on the eternal. And it is really valuable with Taurus in the 12th house, just to simplify our life. And if there's a sort of depression or discontent, do I really need all the things that I have? What do I really care about? What's really meaningful? That's a big quality of this reflection here. Okay, so that's Taurus, Uranus, Jupiter through the houses. Hopefully that was helpful. Please feel free to share your thoughts and reflections on this in the comments below. For those that are new to my channel, I offer one-on-one sessions. These are intuitive guidance sessions in service to your soul growth. I offer this for individuals and I do this for couples. I also offer long-term soul-to-soul companionship sessions for those that want to work with me more long-term. I also have a free class that I teach every Monday. I'm currently doing Pluto aspects, so you can tune in live 10 o'clock Pacific time every Monday on my channel. For those that want to study this work more deeply, my training program enrollment is now closed, but you can enroll any time of the year in my self-study program. I have various individual classes and workshops and class series available for purchase, as well as my complete training program. So you can check all of that in the description below. As always, thank you so much for watching.